Every twisted Aphrodite myth explained. The sea was bleeding, not symbolically, not as a poet's exaggeration. The Mediterranean was literally stained with the blood of a god. A titan named Cronus had just taken a jagged adamantine sickle and used it to castrate his own father, the sky god Uranos. The severed remains were flung into the open sea without ceremony, the way you discard something broken beyond repair. The flesh dissolved, the divine blood mixed with salt water. The foam, the Greeks called it aphros, began to gather and pulse with something that had no business existing. And then Aphrodite rose, fully formed, radiant beyond description, standing on the surface of the water as though gravity itself had decided to make an exception for her. The island of Cyprus received her first footsteps, and every flower on the island bloomed the moment her heel touched earth. Cyprus would remain her most sacred ground for centuries. Temples would be built. Offerings of doves and myrtle would be laid at her altars. Entire cities would organize their civic identity around her worship. But even her oldest, most ancient title carries the violence of that origin. Homer called her Philomaides. Every respectable translator renders this as smile-loving, a nod to her warmth and charm. But some scholars have argued that the word preserves a darker echo of the severed anatomy from which she was born. Not smile-loving, something altogether more primal. This was never the goddess you were sold in popular culture, the Valentine's Day mascot, the soft figure draped in silk, scattering rose petals across a world that only wants to fall in love. That version of Aphrodite is 1,000 years of sanitization wrapped in a pretty myth. Strip it away, and what stands beneath is something born from cosmic mutilation, ancient and genuinely terrifying. The warlike roots. Here is the historical fact that fundamentally changes how you understand Aphrodite. She was not originally Greek. The Greeks inherited her, absorbed her, gave her a new name, and tried to force her into their Olympian family. But her origins stretch back thousands of years before Greece was a civilization, deep into the ancient Near East, where the concept of a goddess of love and the concept of a goddess of war were never separated in the first place. Her closest ancient parallel was Ishtar of Babylon. Ishtar was the goddess of erotic love, fertility, and war simultaneously, not as contradictions, but as a unified force. She descended into the underworld and threatened its queen. She destroyed her own lovers when they no longer served her. Kings carved her image into their palace walls, not as decoration, but as acknowledgement that she held their fates in her hands. The Phoenicians worshipped the same goddess under the name Astarte, and her cult spread across the entire Mediterranean long before Greek sailors ever arrived. When Greek culture collided with these Near Eastern traditions, the merger produced Aphrodite. And everything Ishtar and Astarte were, everything dangerous, everything imperial, everything militarized, came with her. And when that ancient warlike identity finally reached Greece, one city understood it better than any other. In the most militarized city-state in the ancient world, where boys were taken from their families at age 7 to be forged into soldiers, where the entire economy of the city ran on the machinery of war. In that city, Aphrodite was worshipped with particular intensity, and she was not worshipped softly. She was depicted in full battle armor. Her Spartan title was Aphrodite Aurea, warlike Aphrodite, and she carried a second title so striking it almost never makes it into mainstream mythology, Aphrodite Androphonos, translated directly, without softening, killer of men. The Spartans, who feared almost nothing, looked at the goddess of desire and recognized something practical. That desire, passion, and beauty had caused more deaths throughout human history than most weapons ever forged. It was not a romantic observation, it was a battle-hardened one. They built her temples accordingly. The golden net and the curses. For all her power, Aphrodite was given to a husband she never chose. The gods arranged her marriage to Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, the lame god of the forge, the one Olympian whose physical appearance set him apart from every radiant being around him. Zeus made this decision deliberately. Every male god on Olympus wanted Aphrodite, and giving her to any one of them would have destabilized the divine order completely. Hephaestus, brilliant and isolated, was the safest political option. Aphrodite responded to this arrangement with complete and open defiance. She chose Ares, the god of war, as her lover, and she made no attempt to hide it. There is a philosophical layer here worth pausing on. The union of love and war produced a daughter named Harmonia, harmony. The Greeks were encoding something real into that genealogy. They believed that desire and conflict were not opposites, but partners, and that when perfectly balanced, they produced something resembling order. Whether that order lasts is, of course, another matter entirely. Hephaestus was not interested in philosophy. He was a betrayed husband with access to the most advanced craftsmanship in the cosmos. He forged a net of invisible golden chains, so fine they could not be detected by sight or touch, yet stronger than any metal known to gods or men. He strung it above the bed where his wife and Ares met, waited for them to settle in together, and sprung the trap. Then he threw open the doors of the chamber and invited every god on Olympus to come and observe. The Olympians arrived and burst out laughing. Hermes announced openly that he would happily endure the same situation if Aphrodite were involved. Apollo made similar jokes. The entire divine court turned it into a spectacle, but someone was uncomfortable with what he was watching. Poseidon, the god of the sea, stood at the edge of the crowd and felt something the others apparently did not, something close to collective shame at the performance Hephaestus was conducting. He pulled the smith god aside privately and negotiated. He offered to personally guarantee Ares' debt if Hephaestus would release them both and end the spectacle. Poseidon essentially paid Ares' bail, so deeply did he want this display to stop. Hephaestus agreed. The net released. But Aphrodite remembered every face that had laughed. Her vengeances were not quick. They were elaborate, precise, and handed down not for great crimes, but for small ones, for a mother's careless boast, for being born too beautiful, for drawing worship that belonged to a goddess. Myrrha was the daughter of King Cinyras of Cyprus. Her mother made the catastrophic error of boasting that Myrrha surpassed Aphrodite in beauty. The goddess heard it, and what she designed in response was among the most psychologically horrifying punishments in all of ancient mythology. Aphrodite cursed Myrrha with an overwhelming, inescapable desire for her own father. Myrrha fought it to the edge of suicide before her nurse intervened, and made everything worse by helping her act on it. Over consecutive nights, disguised by darkness, Myrrha came to King Cinyras without his knowledge. When he finally lit a lamp and saw the truth, his grief collapsed into murderous rage. He came at her with a sword. She ran until her body gave out. Then she begged the gods to simply erase her from existence. They turned her into a myrrh tree. 9 months later, the bark split open and a child was born, Adonis, the most beautiful mortal who ever lived. The same goddess who destroyed his mother became consumed by love for him the moment she saw him. She caused his existence. Then she fell in love with it. Then there was Psyche, whose only crime was being born so beautiful that mortals stopped visiting Aphrodite's temples and began leaving offerings at her feet instead. The goddess dispatched her son Eros to curse Psyche with an impossible love. Eros instead fell in love with her himself. When Aphrodite discovered this, she turned her full wrath on one mortal girl. She gave Psyche 4 tasks, each designed to kill her. The first, sort an entire warehouse of mixed grains, wheat, barley, lentils, poppies, into separate piles before dawn. An army of ants, moved by pity for Psyche's suffering, materialized and sorted every grain before first light. The second, retrieve golden wool from a flock of sun-maddened, violent rams that crushed anything that approached. A river reed, stirred by the wind, whispered to Psyche to wait until the animals slept at noon, then gather the wool from the thorns where it had snagged along the riverbank. She never touched the rams at all. By now, this should have killed her. It didn't. The third, fill a crystal flask from the source of the river Styx, deep in the underworld, guarded by serpents that never slept and cliffs too sheer for any living thing to climb. The eagle of Zeus descended and filled the flask himself, delivering it to Psyche's outstretched hands. The fourth task was a descent into the underworld itself to retrieve a box of Persephone's beauty. Psyche survived it too. Every death sentence failed. Aphrodite had thrown everything she had at one mortal girl, and it was not enough. The Trojan War. Now understand what Aphrodite was capable of on the scale of nations. At the wedding of the sea nymph Thetis, every god was invited except Eros, the goddess of discord. She arrived uninvited and left behind a single golden apple engraved with 3 words, "For the fairest." 3 goddesses reached for it, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Zeus, knowing better than to step between 3 furious goddesses, refused to judge the contest himself. He assigned the decision to a mortal, Paris, a prince of Troy. Each goddess offered a bribe. Hera offered Paris dominion over kingdoms, the kind of earthly power most men spend their entire lives chasing. Athena offered him supreme military genius, the ability to be undefeated in any battle he ever fought. Aphrodite offered him Helen, already the wife of the Spartan king Menelaus, already loved and claimed and at the center of another man's entire world, the most beautiful woman alive. Paris chose Aphrodite, he took Helen, and the war came. What followed across 10 years of war reveals everything about what Aphrodite actually was on a battlefield. When Paris faced Menelaus in single combat, a duel that would have ended the war immediately, he began to lose, badly. Aphrodite wrapped him in a dense, protective mist and physically carried him off the battlefield, depositing him safely back inside Troy before Menelaus could finish the job. She saved him from the consequences of the very situation she had created for him. Later, when her own son Aeneas was wounded in the fighting, she descended onto the battlefield herself to carry him to safety. And the Greek warrior Diomedes, guided by Athena and temporarily granted the ability to perceive divine beings, drove his spear directly into her wrist. Aphrodite, the killer of men, warlike Aphrodite, the goddess born from cosmic violence, was stabbed by a mortal. The golden ichor, the divine blood of the immortals, poured from her wrist. She dropped Aeneas, shrieked in shock and pain, and fled the battlefield in tears to find Zeus and press her wounded hand against his chest like a child seeking comfort. Zeus gently told her war was not her domain, and he was right, and he was completely wrong. Because Aphrodite had not destroyed Troy with a spear. She had destroyed it with an apple, with a promise. With the simple, devastating act of making one young man want something that belonged to someone else. An entire civilization, its walls, its people, its heroes, its future, reduced to ash and memory because desire moved through one human heart at exactly the right moment. She never needed a sword. She never needed armor. She was the most dangerous force in the ancient world, and she accomplished everything that mattered before the first soldier ever drew a weapon. Aphrodite was not the goddess of love the way we imagine love, soft, forgiving, safe. She was the goddess of desire in its oldest and most complete form, the force that builds civilizations and tears them apart with equal ease, that turns the wisest people irrational and the most powerful people helpless, that was understood by every culture that ever touched the ancient Mediterranean as something closer to a natural disaster than a feeling. If this story changed how you see Aphrodite, hit like and subscribe, because every god on Olympus has a story this dark, and none of them are what you were taught.